The Galactic Arena was a massive, shining structure floating in the middle of a distant alien world. Crowds of thousands filled the seats, their excited murmurs filling the air as they waited for the next match. Aliens of all shapes, sizes, and colors sat alongside humans, watching as fighters from across the galaxy prepared to showcase their skills. Today was special. Today, a human soldier would take on an alien princess in the arena. In the center, a young woman sat proudly. She was an 18-year-old alien princess from the elite Solora Empire, known across the galaxy for its strength and vast resources. Her purple skin shimmered under the arena lights, and her sharp features were framed by long silver hair. She wore a dress of shimmering armor, designed for both beauty and power. Her golden eyes sparkled with confidence. She was strong, fast, and trained for battle. And today, she had a challenge ahead. Across from her, the human warrior entered the arena. His name was unknown to most, just another soldier sent from Earth to test his strength against the galaxy's finest. His armor, a bulky, worn-out suit made of rough, steel-like material, was a far cry from the sleek, advanced technology the aliens were used to. The crowd instantly began to laugh, some even jeering. They could not believe that this weak-looking human thought he could stand against a princess, the pride of her empire. The princess smirked as she observed the human. "Is this really what you've brought to face me?" she said, her voice echoing through the arena, sharp and mocking. The crowd grew quiet, waiting for her next move. The human soldier didn't respond. His face was hidden behind the helmet of his armor, but his body language spoke volumes. He stood tall, unwavering, despite the ridicule. This was his chance. He had nothing to lose. "Do you really think your old, rusty armor will protect you from me?" The princess continued, her words like daggers. The crowd laughed again, as the princess took a step forward. She was certain of victory. The human soldier finally spoke, his voice muffled behind his helmet. "I'm here to fight, not to talk." The princess raised an eyebrow, impressed by his calmness, but she was not worried. She had fought against beings much stronger than this human. He didn't stand a chance. The match was about to begin. The announcer's voice rang through the arena, signaling the start. The princess took her battle stance, her body glowing with energy as she prepared to unleash her full power. The human, meanwhile, stood still, adjusting his stance as though he were waiting for something. The crowd could hardly wait for the action to begin. It was clear this would be a battle between the arrogance of a princess and the unspoken determination of a human soldier. No one could have guessed how it would end, but one thing was for sure. This fight was going to be anything but ordinary. The signal was given, and the match began. The arena was filled with an electric tension as the princess and the human soldier faced each other. The crowd fell silent, eagerly awaiting the first move. The princess flexed her muscles, her shimmering armor reflecting the bright lights of the arena. With a confident smile, she lunged forward, her speed almost impossible for the human to track. The human, however, was not caught off guard. His body moved with surprising precision, dodging her first attack by a hair's breadth. The princess's strike missed, leaving her off balance for just a second. That was all the human needed. He quickly stepped forward and aimed a punch at her side. The blow didn't land with full force, but it still made her stumble. The crowd gasped, clearly surprised that the human could even get close to hitting the princess. She quickly regained her balance and smirked at him. "Not bad," she said, her voice laced with amusement. "But you're still no match for me." The princess shifted her stance and prepared for another assault. She moved with fluid grace, her every step radiating confidence. Her alien strength was unmatched, and she knew it. With a sudden burst of speed, she attacked again, her glowing weapon swinging toward the human's head. But the human didn't flinch. Instead, he ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding the weapon's deadly arc. The princess's weapon swung through the air, missing by mere inches, and she staggered slightly as her momentum carried her too far forward. The human seized the opportunity. He grabbed her by the arm and twisted, using her own momentum against her. The princess let out a small gasp of surprise as she lost her footing and fell to one knee. The crowd went quiet, and even the princess's smug expression faltered for a moment. She quickly pushed herself back up, a fire burning in her eyes. "You dare to touch me," she hissed, her pride bruised. "I will make you regret this." The human didn't answer. His face remained hidden behind his helmet, but his stance told the story. He wasn't here to win through force alone. He was using strategy, waiting for the right moment to strike. He wasn't about to make a reckless move. He had learned that the hard way in the past. The princess, now angrier than ever, charged at him again. Her strikes were faster this time, more precise. She attacked from every angle, aiming to overwhelm him with her strength. But the human was patient. He dodged and blocked, each move calculated and deliberate. He had been trained for this. His armor, while not as advanced as the princess's, was designed for endurance and protection. It wasn't meant for flashy attacks or elegant moves. It was built to withstand the toughest hits and keep the wearer alive in the most dangerous situations. He trusted his armor, but more importantly, he trusted his ability to think on his feet. The crowd watched in awe as the human soldier continued to hold his ground against the princess. The mocking laughter from earlier had died down, replaced by a mixture of disbelief and admiration. The princess's confidence, once so strong, began to waver as she realized that the human was not the easy opponent she had expected. The princess's eyes burned with anger as she saw the human continue to defy her. Each time she struck, he dodged, blocked, or countered with a precision she hadn't anticipated. She was fast, stronger than most. But this human, this warrior, was proving to be far more than a simple soldier in outdated armor. Her pride refused to let her back down. With a loud battle cry, she attacked again, launching herself forward with a force that sent ripples through the arena. Her alien strength was legendary, her blows capable of crushing steel, yet the human managed to stay just one step ahead. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded, no longer sure what to expect. The princess swung her weapon in a wide arc, aiming for the human's midsection. It was a blow meant to end the fight quickly, but the human anticipated it. With incredible speed, he ducked under the attack and rolled to the side. In one fluid motion, he came up behind her, his hand reaching for her arm. He caught her wrist, twisting it just enough to throw her off balance. She gasped in surprise as her weapon slipped from her grip, clattering to the ground. This time, she didn't recover as quickly. The human had outsmarted her, and the realization struck hard. She could feel the sting of humiliation growing in her chest. She had been taught that the Xalora Empire was unbeatable, that no one could stand up to their might. And yet here she was, a princess, the pride of her people, caught in a situation she hadn't expected. The human didn't press his advantage. He held her wrist tightly, but he didn't strike. He just stood there, waiting for her to regain her composure. His armor, though simple, had kept him alive through the worst of the battle. But it was more than just the armor. It was his mind, his ability to adapt quickly to every situation, that kept him standing. For a moment, the princess just stared at him, trying to catch her breath. She had never faced an opponent like this before. Her pride, her training, all of it had told her that she was invincible. But the human soldier was different. He was resourceful, using his surroundings and his wits to stay alive. It was something she hadn't expected from a race she had been taught to dismiss as weak. "You're tougher than you look," the princess said through gritted teeth, her voice barely a whisper. She had no intention of admitting defeat, not yet, but there was a note of respect in her words. She wasn't the type to easily give in, but this human had proven he was worth more than just a quick victory. The human nodded slowly, though his face remained hidden behind the visor of his helmet. He wasn't here to boast. He wasn't here to win at all costs. He was here to survive and prove that humanity was more than the galaxy's underdogs. As the princess pulled her wrist from his grasp, she took a deep breath, her mind working quickly. The human had forced her to rethink everything she believed. This fight wasn't about strength alone. It was about endurance, intelligence, and the will to keep going, no matter the odds. She straightened, a new determination in her eyes. "This isn't over," she said firmly, her voice now steady. She was ready to fight harder, but so was he. The real battle had just begun. The princess took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling as she tried to calm the storm of emotions raging inside her. Anger, pride, confusion. She couldn't deny it anymore. The human soldier was more than she had ever expected. His resourcefulness, his unwavering confidence had thrown her off balance. And now, it was time to show him that she was not someone who would be easily defeated. She stood tall once more, her golden eyes narrowed with focus. With a flick of her hand, her weapon returned to her grasp, glowing with a faint, dangerous light. The crowd held its breath as they watched the battle unfold. They had expected a quick victory for the princess, but the human had turned the tide in ways they hadn't imagined. The princess took a step forward, her movements sharp and calculated. She swung her weapon toward the human once more, this time aiming for his chest. It was a faster, more powerful attack, meant to finish the fight before the human could react. But once again, the human was ready. With a quick sidestep, he avoided the blow, and the princess's weapon struck the ground with a resounding clash. As the princess prepared to strike again, something unexpected happened. The human paused. He took a slow, deliberate step back, reaching for the fastenings on his armor. The crowd, unsure of his intentions, watched in silence as he began to remove it. The princess raised an eyebrow in confusion. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice cold, though there was a hint of curiosity. The human didn't answer. Instead, he carefully removed the helmet that had hidden his face. As the heavy metal clattered to the ground, his eyes met hers, calm and unwavering. He wasn't as bulky as the princess had expected. His muscles weren't as pronounced as hers, but there was a quiet strength in the way he stood, unafraid. The princess watched, still unsure of what he was trying to prove. With each movement, he shed the armor piece by piece, revealing the simple, plain clothing underneath. But there was something in the way he moved, in the way he held himself, that made her pause. He wasn't showing weakness, he was showing confidence. His true strength wasn't in the armor he wore, but in the person beneath it. The human didn't need the armor to fight. It had been a tool, a protection, but it wasn't the thing that made him dangerous. It was his mind, his courage, his determination to keep fighting, no matter the odds. As the last piece of armor fell to the ground, the human stood before the princess in his plain, unadorned clothes. There was no grand display of power, no attempt to intimidate. He simply looked at her, waiting for her next move. The princess blinked, unsure of what to do next. She had mocked his armor, thinking it was nothing more than a crutch. But now, as she looked at him standing there, vulnerable yet unyielding, she realized that he had just proven something far greater than any armor could ever provide. She couldn't help but feel a flicker of respect. For the first time, she saw him not as a weakling, but as a warrior. His armor had never been the true source of his strength. The real power was within him. For a moment, the princess hesitated, her thoughts swirling. She had underestimated him. But now, there was no turning back. This battle wasn't over, but it had taken on a new meaning. It was no longer just a contest of strength. It was a test of will, of who could stand tall when everything else fell away. And for the first time in this battle, the princess wasn't sure who would come out on top. The human soldier stood in front of the princess, his face now fully visible. His clothes were simple, not impressive by any means, but in the way he stood, his posture strong and steady. It was clear that he was not an easy opponent. The princess, her breath steady, eyed him with a mix of disbelief and curiosity. This was no longer a battle between a princess and a mere soldier. This had turned into something much bigger. The princess gripped her weapon tightly, her knuckles white. She had never imagined herself in a situation like this. Her entire life, she had been trained to be powerful, to be unbeatable. She had been told that she was the future of her people, destined to lead with strength and wisdom. But now, in front of this human, everything she had believed was being tested. She was used to seeing her enemies cower in fear. She was used to being the one with the power. But the human, he didn't fear her. He wasn't intimidated by her alien strength or her reputation. He had stood his ground, even after all her strikes, and now he stood there, defiant, unafraid, and somehow more powerful than she had ever imagined. The human said nothing. He didn't need to. His eyes, clear and unwavering, told her everything she needed to know. He was not here to fight for glory. He was here to prove that humans were more than what the galaxy thought of them. He was showing the princess that power was not just about physical strength or advanced technology. It was about something deeper. The princess took a step forward, her eyes narrowing. She had to finish this. She couldn't back down now. She was a princess of the Salora Empire. She couldn't let a human, someone from a planet she had been taught to consider weak, defeat her in front of the entire galaxy. But as she prepared to strike again, she noticed something. There was no fear in his eyes, no hesitation, just calm determination. It was as if he knew something she didn't, as if he understood the true nature of this battle. She hesitated. It wasn't like her to hesitate. In all her training, she had never once doubted herself in the heat of battle. But here, now with this human soldier, she felt a shift inside her. She could feel her own pride and arrogance start to crumble. The human didn't make a move. He simply waited, as if daring her to continue. His silence spoke volumes. It was a challenge, but not a boastful one. It was the challenge of someone who knew they had already won, not with their strength, but with their resolve. The princess's grip on her weapon loosened for a moment. She stared at him, the weight of his gaze pressing against her. She had spent so long believing that her empire, her race, was superior. But in this moment, she realized that strength wasn't just about power. It was about will. And the human had more will than anyone she had ever faced. Her thoughts raced. She had been so certain of her victory, so confident in her abilities. But now, she stood in front of the one person who had forced her to question everything. The princess opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in her life, she was speechless. Not because she was afraid, but because she realized something profound. This human, this soldier, had earned her respect. The princess stood still for a moment, her weapon hanging loosely at her side. Her breathing had slowed, and she was no longer rushing to finish the fight. The human soldier was still before her, silent but unwavering. His expression was unreadable, but his calm presence in the face of everything she had thrown at him was beginning to sink in. For the first time in this battle, the princess felt something she had never experienced in combat. Uncertainty. Her mind was racing, and the weight of the moment pressed down on her. She had always been taught that the strength of the Salora Empire was unmatched, that no one could challenge them. But here, standing before this human, she was forced to confront the truth. Her assumptions had been wrong. The princess had spent her entire life being trained for this very moment. To be the strongest, the fastest, the most intelligent. She had been taught that the galaxy was hers to command, that all other races were beneath her. But the human soldier had proven that strength wasn't just about raw power. It wasn't about fancy weapons or advanced armor. It was about something deeper, something she had never fully understood until now. As she stood there, trying to collect her thoughts, she found herself thinking back to her childhood. She remembered how her parents had always told her that the Salora Empire was destined to rule the galaxy. She had never questioned it, never thought that anyone could challenge their supremacy. She had been taught to believe that power was everything. But now, as she faced the human soldier, she was starting to realize that there were other kinds of strength. The human had not only survived her attacks, he had done so with grace and intelligence. He hadn't relied on brute force, but on strategy, patience, and the will to never give up. The princess couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She had never faced an opponent like this before. Someone who wasn't just strong, but also capable of outthinking her at every turn. She looked at the human, really looked at him, for the first time. His body was not as large as hers, and his armor was nothing compared to the sleek, advanced designs of her own people. But there was something about him that commanded respect. His strength wasn't in his muscles, his weapon, or his armor. It was in his mind and his spirit. The princess clenched her fist around her weapon, the weight of the realization heavy on her shoulders. She had spent so long believing in the superiority of her people, but now she understood that it wasn't enough to be the strongest. To truly lead, to truly be powerful, one had to be more than just a warrior. They had to be a survivor, a thinker, and someone who could rise above their circumstances. And the human soldier was all of those things. For a moment, the princess felt a flicker of something she had never known: respect. She had never respected anyone outside of her own kind, but here, before her, was a human who had earned it. She didn't lower her weapon, but she no longer saw the human as an enemy. Instead, she saw him as a reflection of everything she had yet to learn. The battle was far from over, but something had changed inside her. The princess knew that this fight was no longer about winning. It was about understanding. And she was finally starting to understand just how much there was to learn from the humans. The princess stood still, her grip on her weapon loosening as she watched the human soldier. The crowd had fallen into an uneasy silence, waiting for what would happen next. What had begun as a contest of strength had shifted into something more complex. The battle wasn't over, but the princess now realized that this fight was about far more than just winning. She had underestimated him at first, thinking his armor and his people were weak. But now she saw him differently. The human wasn't relying on brute force. He had survived not just by his strength, but by his cleverness and determination. She could see it in his eyes. There was no fear. There was no hesitation. He was ready to keep going, no matter what came next. The princess felt a flicker of something unfamiliar: doubt. She had always believed that her people were the greatest in the galaxy. The Xelora Empire was strong, and she, as their princess, was its finest warrior. But this human soldier, with his plain armor and simple tactics, was forcing her to rethink everything. She tightened her grip on her weapon and charged at him once again. This time, she would finish it. She was faster, stronger, and more skilled. She would not let him outsmart her again. The human stood his ground, his eyes never leaving hers. He didn't move. Instead, he seemed to be waiting for her to make the first move. As she swung her weapon, the human ducked low, just in time for the blade to miss him by inches. He spun to the side, narrowly avoiding another attack, his movements fluid and calculated. The princess attacked again, her strikes coming faster now. But he continued to evade each one, his reflexes sharp and his mind focused. She couldn't understand it. How was he doing this? He wasn't stronger than her. He wasn't faster. His armor wasn't as advanced. Yet he seemed to anticipate every move she made, his every action calculated and purposeful. She had expected him to tire, to falter, but he didn't. With every dodge, every sidestep, he seemed to grow more confident, more in control. The princess's strikes became more erratic as frustration built up inside her. She had always been the one in control, the one who set the pace of battle. But here, with this human, she was starting to lose that control. She had never faced an enemy who fought with such calm, such resilience. The human soldier was not relying on power or speed. Instead, he was using the one thing that the princess had taken for granted: his mind. He understood that true strength wasn't just about winning a battle through sheer force. It was about outthinking your opponent, staying one step ahead, and using the environment to your advantage. The princess's frustration began to grow. She had always been the best, the strongest. But this human, with his simple armor and his unassuming presence, was showing her that power alone didn't win wars. There was something else, something that she had never learned in all her training. The princess paused for a moment, breathing heavily, her weapon still raised. She couldn't deny it anymore. The human was a worthy opponent. He had proven that he was far more than she had ever imagined. The battle wasn't over, but something had changed. The princess realized that this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a test of who could adapt, who could outlast the other. The human didn't speak, but his eyes told her everything. He had no intention of giving up. Not now, not ever. And the princess couldn't help but feel a small sense of respect for him. This fight wasn't over, but it was already changing her perspective on what true strength really was. The princess wiped the sweat from her brow, her grip on her weapon tightening again. She had underestimated the human at every turn, and now she was beginning to feel the weight of her mistakes. Her strikes had become less precise, more desperate as her energy began to drain. The human, however, still moved with the same calm precision, as though he wasn't tired at all. He was like a machine, his every move calculated, every action purposeful. She couldn't keep up with him. The anger inside her boiled over, but she fought to control it. This human had thrown her off balance in ways no one ever had, and that was exactly what he wanted. He didn't want to overpower her with force. He wanted to wear her down, to outlast her. The princess charged again, faster this time, with all her strength behind her. She swung her weapon down at him, aiming for his head, hoping to end it once and for all. But the human ducked, just as he had done before. This time, instead of just dodging, he stepped forward, closing the distance between them. In one fluid motion, he grabbed her arm and twisted it, using her own momentum against her. For a brief moment, the princess felt herself losing control. The pressure on her arm was immense, and she staggered backward, trying to break free from his hold. Her heart raced as she struggled, but no matter how hard she tried, the human didn't let go. She could feel the weight of her own pride pulling at her, the belief that she was invincible. It was slipping away, piece by piece, like a crumbling fortress. The human was relentless, calm, and focused. There was no hesitation in his movements. He wasn't fighting with anger or fear. He was fighting with purpose. As she finally broke free, she took a step back, her chest heaving with exertion. She could see the flicker of determination in his eyes. He hadn't given up, not for a second. And somehow that made him even more dangerous than she had anticipated. For the first time, the princess stopped and took a deep breath. She had always been told that the strong always win, that physical power was the key to victory. But this human had shown her something different. He was proving that sometimes strength came from within. It wasn't about who could hit hardest or fastest. It was about who could endure the longest, who could think more clearly when everything else seemed to fall apart. The crowd, who had once jeered at the human, now watched in stunned silence. They had expected an easy victory for the princess, but now they were witnessing something far more unexpected. A human, in tattered armor, holding his own against the greatest warrior of their empire. It was an incredible sight. The princess looked at the human, her gaze steady. She no longer saw him as just an enemy. She saw him as a challenge, one that she might not win, not without a change in how she fought. She wasn't just facing a soldier. She was facing someone who understood strength in a way she never had. Her grip on her weapon tightened, but this time it wasn't out of anger. It was out of respect. She didn't know how this fight would end, but she knew one thing. She would give it everything she had. And in the end, maybe that was the real victory. The realization that even the strongest could learn something new. The princess stood, staring at the human soldier, her mind racing. The fight had lasted longer than she had anticipated, and she could feel the exhaustion settling into her bones. Her body was bruised from his strikes, and her movements were slower now. The human, on the other hand, seemed just as focused and composed as he had been at the start of the battle. He wasn't the strongest, the fastest, or the most advanced fighter she had ever faced, but there was something about him that made him more dangerous than anyone she had ever encountered. He wasn't giving up. That realization struck her harder than any blow she had received. The princess had always been told that strength came from power. Her people had taught her that the greatest warriors were those who could defeat their enemies with ease, using speed and overwhelming force. But the human, this soldier, had shown her something else. He had shown her that strength also came from endurance, from the ability to stand firm, no matter the odds, to keep fighting, even when it seemed like there was no hope. She could feel a change inside herself. The arrogance that had filled her every move at the start of the battle had faded, replaced by something else. Something new. She respected him. She couldn't deny it anymore. This human, in his simple armor, had earned her respect in a way no one else had. He had fought with everything he had, and he wasn't about to stop. The crowd, who had once mocked the human, now watched in complete silence, waiting to see what would happen next. They had expected the princess to win without breaking a sweat, but now they were beginning to understand what she already knew, that this battle was different. It wasn't just about winning. It was about something much deeper. The human had shown that the strength of a warrior wasn't always in their power, it was in their heart. The princess took a deep breath, her weapon still raised in front of her, but her posture had changed. She wasn't standing like an unyielding force anymore. She was standing like someone who had learned something, someone who had been humbled by the fight. The human, still silent, didn't move. He didn't raise his fists in triumph. He didn't taunt her. He simply stood there, waiting for her to make the next move. His eyes were calm, steady, like a force of nature that could not be shaken. There was no arrogance in his gaze. There was no boastfulness, just determination. And that, in itself, was enough. The princess took one last glance at him. She could see the same fire in his eyes that she had seen in her own. He wasn't here to fight for glory. He was here because he believed in something greater. He believed in standing up, no matter what, and showing the galaxy that humanity wasn't weak, that they were a force to be reckoned with. "Your strength is not in your armor," the princess finally said, her voice softer than it had been. "It is in your spirit." The human said nothing. He didn't need to. The princess lowered her weapon. She wasn't defeated, not yet, but the fight had changed. It wasn't about victory anymore. It was about respect. And for the first time, the princess understood what it truly meant to be a warrior. It wasn't just about crushing your opponent. It was about standing tall, no matter the odds, and proving that you would never back down. The crowd began to cheer, but the princess didn't hear them. She was lost in the moment. She had gained something more valuable than victory. She had earned a new understanding, and it was something that would stay with her forever. The battle was over, but something much deeper had been won. The arena was filled with the sound of applause, but for the princess, it felt distant. She stood in the center, still facing the human soldier who had just earned her respect. His quiet determination had changed the way she saw the world and herself. She had entered this fight thinking it would be another easy victory, but instead, she had found something far more valuable: understanding. The crowd cheered for both the princess and the human, recognizing the unexpected turn of events. But the princess didn't join in the celebration. She stood silently, reflecting on the fight, the lessons it had taught her, and the new perspective it had given her. She had never imagined that a human, someone she had been taught to see as weak and inferior, could challenge her in such a profound way. The human stood across from her, still silent, his helmet now at his side. He looked just as calm and focused as he had throughout the battle. The princess could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but there was no sign of defeat. He had fought with everything he had, and she knew now that he was more than just a soldier in old armor. He was a symbol of humanity's strength, the strength that came from resilience, from the will to never give up. The princess stepped forward, her footsteps slow and deliberate. She wasn't sure what she was going to say, but something inside her urged her to speak. She looked at the human soldier, her voice steady but tinged with admiration. "You are stronger than I ever expected," she said, "not because of your strength or your armor, but because of your will. You fought with everything you had, and I can't deny that I respect you for it." The human nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. There was no arrogance in his expression, no hint of pride. He simply accepted her words, as if he had expected nothing more and nothing less. The princess found that even more humbling. "I came here not to win," he said quietly, his voice muffled by his helmet. "I came here to prove that humans can stand tall, no matter the odds." The princess nodded slowly, her heart stirring with a newfound respect. The human's words echoed in her mind, and she realized that they held a truth she had never fully understood until now. Strength wasn't just about overpowering your enemy. It was about standing firm, facing challenges head-on, and showing the world that you could endure, no matter how difficult the path might be. She turned to face the crowd, raising her hand in acknowledgement of their cheers. The battle was over, but it had changed her. It had opened her eyes to the fact that strength came in many forms, and sometimes the greatest strength was the courage to keep fighting even when the odds were stacked against you. The princess glanced back at the human one last time. There was no anger, no bitterness. There was only respect. For the first time in her life, she felt that the fight had been worth more than just a victory. It had been a lesson that would stay with her forever. "I will remember this," she said, her voice strong, "and I will never underestimate humanity again." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving the arena behind her. The crowd's cheers continued to echo through the air, but the princess wasn't listening anymore. She had learned something much more important than winning. She had learned that true strength wasn't always what it seemed, and sometimes the greatest warriors weren't the ones who fought with the most power, but the ones who fought with the most heart.